This happened to me several years ago. My parents just bought a new house up in the Smoky Mountains, 20 to 30 minutes from the closest town. It was actually Halloween morning that they were set to move in, so the October chill was in the air. My boyfriend and I offered our help in getting things transferred from the old house to the new one. After unloading the first haul, my parents decided to head back out of town to grab the rest. My boyfriend went with them, but I stayed behind with our two dogs and cat. There was a couch and a TV left over from the previous owners who lived there, so the living room was already sort of furnished. The TV itself was set up in a corner cabinet, and the couch was near it along the wall. I had my cell phone with me, which at the time was sitting on the folding tray next to the couch while it charged. Since we had the internet and satellite hooked up already, it allowed me to occupy my time watching whatever movies and shows were playing that night. I'll admit that I was nervous staying in a new house, in the woods, after dark, even with our pets around. I'd been lying down watching TV when I got a little cold, which wasn't unexpected given the season. I figured I'd make some hot cocoa, which I had to do in the microwave because I couldn't use the stove yet since we were still unpacking. I found a mug which I filled with water, and while it was heating, I decided to wait in the living room. Once the timer was up, I headed back to the kitchen to get my cup and things to mix the cocoa together. Walking towards the couch afterwards, I immediately noticed that my cell phone was no longer on the TV tray, but instead lying on the ground a good distance away from it. I'm pretty sure that I would have felt the impact if I had bumped the tray hard enough to knock my phone that far across the room. It's unlikely that it was the animals that had done it, since they hadn't moved from where they were lying. I thought it was weird, and even wondered if maybe the house was haunted or something, though I hadn't heard anything about unusual activity from the previous owners or my family. I couldn't talk to anyone about it since it was late, but I figured that I'd mention it later when my parents got back. Shrugging it off, since I couldn't say one way or another what had actually happened, I went on watching the current movie that was on while I warmed myself with the cocoa. It wasn't long before I was lost in the show, and the strange event was out of my mind, though I quickly became reminded of it when the dog started growling. I glanced over at them, and they were both looking towards the dining room area, which was connected to the living room. The fur was risen all the way up on the ridges of their spines, as if they were sensing something threatening. I peered into the darkness ahead and didn't see anything weird, but it still freaked me out. It was unusual behavior for our dogs, and given the situation with me being in the mountains at night, I became even more nervous. Within the next moments, I detected what I want to say was a scent of cherry tobacco, which became stronger as I sat there. My parents and I don't smoke, and while my boyfriend did at the time, he only used regular cigarettes, and he was miles away. I was starting to think about hauntings and ghosts again, though the previous owners were still alive, and they were the only other people who had owned the house before us. As far as I knew, no one had actually died there. Just as quick as the scent of cherry tobacco filled the room, it had left as if I had imagined it. Though the dogs was still a little on edge, so I knew I wasn't the only one feeling that something was off. Eventually, things calmed down, and the animals settled back down to sleep. I was a little shaken, but thankfully, nothing else freaky happened that night. I'm not sure if there was a supernatural presence in the house that evening, but if there was, I'm glad that I didn't meet it face to face.